All right, some very dramatic warnings coming from some members of the media about what the country could be in for if former President Trump wins a second term. Take a look at some of these.
Imprisonment is an extreme part, but think about IRS audits. Think about government pressure on media companies.
They're trying to end the American system of government. They're trying to bring about a revolution against the American system of government and against the United States of America. And in this story, we're the Americans.
This is what I think the Russian game plan is. They are going to do everything possible, and I think, in order to try to ensure that Donald Trump is going to come out on top in November.
Wow, here we go again with another Russia hoax, apparently by some of the same folks. So let's bring in North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who ran against the former president in the Republican primary, but is now campaigning for him and is said to be on the VP shortlist. Governor Burgum, thank you. Good to have you with us today. What goes through your mind when you hear these dire projections about being against the entire system of U.S. government and potentially throwing people in jails and in camps? Governor Burgum?
Oh, hi, Martha. Sound just came through there, but
yeah,
hey, great to be with you.
You know what? I don't know if you think, good to have you with us. I don't know if you heard the sound that we just played, but it was a montage of a number of people in the media talking about the possibility of imprisonment for people who disagree with former President Trump, people being put in camps, that the entire system of government would be under collapse pressure under a second Trump term. What would you say to them? What would you want them to think about?
Well, Martha, I think you know that this is just ridiculous. The Democrats seem to have two strategies. One is be afraid, and the second strategy is be even more afraid. There's no basis at all in these assertions that they're making. It's all this fear-mongering. President Trump served as our president for 4 years, and during that time, we had peace and prosperity. Under Joe Biden, we're actually living under a dictatorship today where he's bypassing Congress on immigration policy. He's bypassing Congress on protecting our border. He's bypassing Congress on student loan forgiveness. I mean, he's defying the Supreme Court. I mean, those are the things that authoritarians and dictators do, is they don't follow our democratic processes and they just assert their own liberal view. And that's what the Biden administration is doing. So I think the whole thing is completely ridiculous. And I think the thing they're really afraid of is that President Trump is ahead in the polls with all the groups in America and on all the issues that matter most to most Americans, whether it's the border, whether it's inflation, whether it's interest rates, whatever those are, President Trump is leading. And that's probably the thing that really has them scared.
All right. In the past, you, in an interview, said that, and we talked about this before, but I looked back at it, you said you wouldn't do business with President Trump. And I'm thinking about some of the people who worked in the administration the last time around who left because they didn't like the way what they were seeing at the White House. So is that, having said that you wouldn't do business with him based on, I assume, something that was real to you at that time, do you have any concern about being in this administration and how you might feel about it if you were actually in the White House?
Well, I've got no concerns at all about being in this administration. And of course, Martha, you know that I endorsed President Trump early in 2016. I endorsed him in 2020, and I was one of the first ones to endorse him this year. And at least in our state, it's been a world of difference with President Trump in office versus President Biden. So no qualms at all around that. And of course, having a business person in the White House is fantastic, particularly given all the economic challenges that we have as a nation. But for me, when I didn't know President Trump in 2016 at all. I never had met him when the first time I endorsed him. 2020, I'd had an opportunity to work with him as a governor would with the president. That relationship was professional and fantastic. But I only really got to know him as a person from January until now, and having to spend that time with him, I wish every American could see what the First Lady Catherine and I have seen, and that's someone who cares deeply about this country, who works tirelessly, and who applies common sense to all the issues that every American, working American family is struggling with. I mean, he's just fantastic.
Okay, so he's losing some traction in the last month since the end of the court case, and being found criminal in those 34 counts, which he, of course, is appealing and denies. But he's lost traction with independents during that period. Here's the now versus May. Now Biden is up 2 with independents, and back in May, Trump was up 12 with independents. What do you say to that? And how do you think that maybe you on the ticket might improve his numbers with independents?
Well, I think that President Trump's going to win this election regardless of who's on the ticket with him. And I think, of course, again, this is just the strategy that they have, which is lawfare. The Democrats are applying that at multiple levels. I mean, they've been persecuting President Trump since before he was in office the first time. That's what they've been doing. In the end, I don't think it's going to work. Americans understand that this sham trial. I mean, I don't know how you take business filing errors that are misdemeanors beyond their statute of limitations and somehow through alchemy turn those into multiple felonies. I mean, most Americans will just see that for what it is, which is attacking a political opponent in an election year. And in the end of the day, they're going to vote, and he includes independents, because inflation, the border, public safety, all of that affects independents as well.
All right, out of time, so I just need a yes or no. Do you want to be the vice president on that ticket?
That's up for President Trump to decide, and President Trump alone, he's got a lot of great choices.
All right. Well, there's a lot of attention on that issue because it's a 4-year presidency, and that person's going to be very well positioned for the next round if indeed the ticket is successful. Governor Burgum, thank you very much. It's always good to have you with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Martha.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.